Hello there. My name is Noah Bennett, and I want to thank you for being here with me tonight. We drift into the ancient and quietly astonishing world of trees. A world that stands in plain sight, yet holds mysteries so deep they feel almost hidden on purpose. Trees may seem still, but beneath their calm surface runs a living pulse shaped by centuries of wind, seasons, and silent communication. Step into a forest, and you enter a slower rhythm, one that moves with patience and subtle intent, where every branch and root is connected to something larger than itself. There is a concealed wisdom woven through these landscapes, an intelligence expressed not in words but in patterns of growth, chemistry, and quiet cooperation. Trees manipulate their surroundings and sense the world in ways we are only just beginning to understand. The deeper you listen, the more the forest reveals, and the more the ordinary begins to feel extraordinary.
If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is settle in. Allow your eyes to soften and your breathing to slow, and let the ancient wisdom of trees guide you to sleep. Let's begin. Trees communicate through underground networks of fungi. Beneath the forest floor lies a hidden world of threads so fine that millions can exist in a single handful of soil. These fungal strands explore the ground in every direction until they find the roots of trees and gently fuse with them. Once connected, they become part of a shared system that moves signals and materials with remarkable flexibility. When conditions shift toward drought, the flow of water can travel from one region of the network to another, guided by subtle changes in chemistry.
When a section of the forest is suddenly shaded or disturbed, the roots there can receive nutrients from distant trees that are still thriving in stable light. This underground lattice works slowly, yet it maintains a steady balance that keeps the forest functioning as a cooperative whole. The individual trees do not act alone. They operate as nodes in a living circuit that spreads across the soil like an invisible blueprint of the entire woodland community. Some trees can warn each other about danger using airborne signals. When the surface of a leaf is disturbed, its chemistry changes in an instant. Molecules begin to form within the damaged tissue and drift outward into the air, where they mix with the surrounding atmosphere. These drifting vapors are so faint that humans rarely notice them in the wild, yet nearby trees detect them through tiny openings in their leaves. Once the signal is received, internal pathways activate and begin adjusting the plant's internal balance.
Defensive compounds rise in concentration. Leaf toughness increases.
Growth slows so the tree can place more energy into protection. All of this begins before any visible threat reaches the truncal canopy. The surrounding trees respond as though they have been given early warning. They begin preparing themselves for the same challenge. Even if the source of danger is still far away, forest air may feel calm, but it carries constant information shaped by the lived experiences of the plants that inhabit it. Certain trees release chemicals that call predators to defend them. When insects such as caterpillars or beetle larvae attack a tree, the damage triggers a cascade of internal responses that alters the chemistry of the air around its leaves. These newly released airborne molecules drift outward as a precise call for help, not to other plants but to something far more effective. The signal is aimed at animals that prey on the very insects causing the harm. Tiny, hunting insects are exquisitely sensitive to these chemical cues and can track them from remarkable distances. Once they arrive, they disrupt or eliminate the pests that began the attack. Through this process, the surrounding ecosystem becomes the tree's defense system, protecting it without the tree needing to lift a single branch in resistance. The tree's survival becomes tied to a complex food web that responds naturally to the scent of conflict in the leaves. Over time, these interactions strengthen entire forests, creating living landscapes built on quiet exchanges between plant and predator. There are trees that keep time using internal biological clocks. Inside the cells of a tree are repeating patterns that rise and fall with remarkable consistency. These patterns act like an internal schedule that controls when the tree opens its pores to release water, when it closes them to conserve moisture, and when it prepares for major seasonal changes. Even if the tree is placed in environments with constant light or constant darkness, these internal rhythms continue for many days without fail. They coordinate cellular activity, helping every part of the organism remain synchronized. The timing of budding, leaf production, flowering, and the eventual shedding of leaves is shaped by this inner sense of time. Trees use sunlight and temperature only as additional cues, not as the call mechanism. The real structure of their daily and yearly routine originates from within. This built-in timing system allows trees to anticipate the world around them, instead of simply reacting to it. Some trees can change their leaf chemistry to repel specific insects. When an insect begins feeding, the leaf does not simply endure the damage. Sensors within the tissue detect the saliva of the attacker and begin producing substances designed to discourage that particular species. The change can involve creating bitter flavors, altering the texture of the leaf surface, or building compounds that interfere with the insect's ability to digest plant material. The response is precise enough that two different insects feeding on the same tree may trigger completely different defensive strategies. This targeted approach allows the plant to conserve energy because it produces only the compounds that matter for the threat it currently faces. The transformation continues until the danger passes, after which the leaf often shifts back toward normal growth. The adaptability of this process reveals a level of responsiveness that is far more dynamic than the calm appearance of a leaf might suggest. A few trees can clone themselves into vast connected forests. Some species possess the ability to produce new trunks from their roots, resulting in large clusters of genetically identical stems that all belong to a single organism. While each trunk looks like an individual tree from the outside, all are fed and supported by a continuous underground system that can stretch across a wide landscape. As older trunks age and fall, new growth emerges from the same enduring foundation. This pattern continues for centuries and can create a forest that behaves more like a single organism, expressing itself in many separate bodies. When fire, drought, or cold damages part of the colony, other trunks continue to supply resources to the remaining root system, allowing regeneration to begin almost immediately. The resilience of these connected forests comes from their unity. What appears to be a group of individuals is truly one life form, exploring space through many distinct vertical stems. Some ancient trees are older than entire civilizations. In isolated valleys and high mountain regions, there are trees that began growing long before the earliest known written stories. The roots have held the same soil for hundreds upon hundreds of years, while climates shifted, coastlines moved, and cultures rose and faded. When researchers study the growth rings in their wood, they uncover detailed evidence of ancient droughts, periods of unusual warmth, and sudden environmental events that would otherwise be lost to time. These trees have endured storms that reshaped entire landscapes and survived conditions that would end the lives of younger species. Their longevity is not a simple matter of slow growth. It is the result of highly efficient internal systems that repair damage resist disease, and maintain delicate balance even during long stretches of hardship. Standing near one of these ancient beings is a reminder that the planet carries memories far older than our species. There are trees that never truly die, but instead continually rebuild themselves. Some species retain living tissues deep within their bases, even after their central trunks hollow out or collapse. As long as these hidden tissues remain intact, the organism continues to generate new growth from the same root system. Fresh shoots rise where old wood has fallen away, creating younger trunks that carry the identity of the original tree into the next century. Over time, the outer appearance of the plant may change completely. The individual trunks may fall, rot, or scatter, yet the living core remains active and continues to create new growth from its protected interior. These trees survive not by maintaining a single structure, but by repeatedly rebuilding themselves in a steady cycle of decay and renewal. What appears to be a small cluster of young trunks is often the latest chapter of a life that began long before the surrounding forest reached its present form. Some tree species can regrow entirely after being cut to the ground. In species with strong regenerative abilities, roots store large amounts of energy during normal growth. They also preserve tiny, dormant buds that remain inactive until the upper portion of the plant is removed. When the trunk is cut, these buds awaken and begin to grow rapidly, supported by the rich supply of sugars and nutrients in the buried root system. New stems appear in clusters and grow faster than typical young trees because they can draw on the resources accumulated during the previous life of the trunk. Over time, the strongest of these stems develops into a new main trunk, restoring the tree's structural form, even though the original above-ground body was lost. This regenerative cycle allows these species to endure repeated disturbances and remain a stable presence in their ecosystems. A few resilient trees can survive complete fire damage by sprouting from hidden buds. In fire-prone regions, some trees develop thick, protective layers around their most important tissues. Beneath the outer bark lie small, living structures that stay insulated, even when the surrounding trunk becomes charred. When a fire passes through, the visible canopy may vanish entirely, and the tree may appear lifeless. Yet, the protected buds remain safe inside their natural shield. Once rain returns and temperatures drop, these buds begin to extend new shoots. Green growth spreads across blackened stems or rises directly from the base. The tree does not rely on seeds to recover. It rebuilds itself using pots that were prepared long in advance. This strategy allows entire landscapes to return to life after severe fire seasons and ensures that the species can persist even under challenging environmental cycles. Some trees create their own microclimates that shape entire ecosystems. A large canopy does more than cast shade. It changes the entire behavior of the air beneath it. The leaves slow the movement of wind and reduce the intensity of sunlight long before it reaches the soil. As a result, moisture lingers for longer periods of time, and temperatures shift less dramatically between day and night. This stable environment supports insects that cannot tolerate direct sunlight, birds that prefer cooler air, and plants that would not survive in open ground. Over time, a single tree can influence the humidity and temperature of an entire patch of forest. The branches intercept rainfall, breaking it into softer droplets that fall gently to the soil. That change in water flow alters how nutrients move and how roots anchor themselves. Even the soundscape becomes different because the canopy softens the impact of rain and wind. When scientists study these zones, they find that the presence of a large tree does not simply host life. It engineers the conditions that make that life possible. There are trees that make rain by releasing moisture into the air. In warm regions where sunlight is intense, trees have developed a remarkable strategy for cooling themselves. They pull large amounts of water from the soil and send it upward through their trunks until it reaches the leaves. Once there, the water evaporates into the atmosphere as a fine mist that rises through the canopy. As countless leaves release moisture at the same time, the surrounding air becomes more humid and begins to rise into the sky. When this moisture collects in the upper atmosphere, clouds fall more easily over large areas. This process can influence patterns of rainfall, turning forests into engines that help maintain stable weather. Researchers have found that entire regions would become far drier without this steady upward movement of water. These trees are not simply responding to climate, they are helping to create it. The cycle of evaporation, cloud formation, and rainfall becomes part of the forest's internal rhythm. Tree roots can engineer soil to become more fertile over centuries. Roots do more than search for water. They reshape the very structure of the ground they inhabit. As they grow, they create pathways that allow air and moisture to travel deeper into the soil. When roots die, they decompose and leave behind channels rich with nutrients. Over many cycles of growth and decay, these changes accumulate, transforming compact mineral soil into a loose and fertile layer that supports a wide range of organisms. Certain trees release compounds that bind with minerals underground, forming stable crystals that hold nutrients in place. Others bring elements such as calcium or nitrogen up from deeper layers and deposit them closer to the surface. Microbes gather around these roots, feeding on sugars and producing helpful substances that improve soil structure. Worms and insects follow, attracted to the soft microhabitats created by the constant movement of roots. After centuries of this slow engineering, the ground becomes a complex living system that can support entire communities of plants and animals. Some trees can store enormous amounts of water inside their trunks. In regions where rain arrives in brief bursts, followed by long dry seasons, certain species survive by turning their trunks into living reservoirs. Their tissues swell during the wet season as they pull water upward and store it within specialized cells. This stored water remains sealed inside the wood until the environment begins to dry. As moisture disappears from the soil, the tree draws from its internal reserve to keep its leaves functioning and its growth steady. The structure of these trunks is surprisingly complex. Layers of dense tissue surround pockets of softer material that expand and contract with changing water levels. This system allows the tree to maintain stable internal pressure even when the outside world becomes extremely dry. Animals and insects depend on these trees because the stored water supports leaves, flowers, and fruits long after other vegetation has faded. In some landscapes, these water-storing trunks act as the final anchors of life during severe drought. A few desert trees can pull moisture from air that feels completely dry. Desert air often contains far less moisture than a human can detect. Yet, some trees have evolved surfaces capable of capturing tiny traces of humidity. Their leaves are covered in fine structures that encourage condensation, even when the atmosphere seems barren. Before dawn, when the temperature drops, these structures begin collecting microscopic droplets that gather into films of water. The tree absorbs this moisture through specialized pores, funneling it towards the tissues that need it most. This process repeats every night, allowing the tree to survive in areas where rainfall is rare and groundwater lies far out of reach. Researchers studying these species have discovered that their ability to harvest water from the air supports entire ecosystems of insects and birds that rely on the more limited moisture the tree makes available. Each night becomes a slow cycle of collection and renewal, helping the tree endure conditions that few other large plants could survive. Certain coastal trees can survive on salty water along shorelines where ocean tides rise and fall throughout the day. Some trees must deal with water that is far too salty for most plants. They meet this challenge by filtering out salt at the root level using complex membranes that only allow fresh water to pass through. Other species pull in salty water but store the salt inside older leaves that eventually fall away, removing the excess from the plant. Some even excrete crystals onto the surface of their leaves, where wind and rain carry the salt away. These strategies allow the trees to live in areas flooded with sea tier from storms or daily tides. Their presence stabilizes coastlines, prevents erosion, and provides shelter for birds and marine creatures that depend on roots and branches extending over the water. Without these remarkable salt handling systems, many coastal ecosystems would lose their most important anchor species. Some trees breathe in patterns that change with the seasons. The tiny openings on the surface of leaves, known as pores, open and close in patterns controlled by light, temperature, and internal pressure. During warm months, these pores open wide to release water vapor into the air and draw carbon dioxide inward for photosynthesis. When cold weather arrives, the pores behave very differently. Many trees restrict their opening times to conserve water, and some close them entirely to protect their tissues from freezing. As the seasons progress, the rhythm of these openings shifts in ways that mirror the changing environment. Scientists can track these patterns in long-term studies and find that each species has a signature breathing rhythm shaped by its evolutionary history. These seasonal movements help trees regulate temperature, conserve energy, and adjust to shifts in day length. The process is subtle, yet it influences everything from growth rate to the timing of leaf drop. A few trees can alter the acidity of the soil around them. Through their roots, some species release substances that change the chemical balance of the surrounding soil. These compounds can increase or decrease acidity, depending on the needs of the tree. Altering acidity reshapes which minerals dissolve easily and which remain trapped in solid form. This affects how nutrients become available and influences which other plants can grow nearby. In some forests, a single species changes the acidity enough to create distinct zones where only certain organisms thrive. Microbes respond as well, shifting their activity along with the chemical conditions. Over long periods, these small changes accumulate and transform the soil into a unique habitat, supported by the tree's constant influence. The result is a microenvironment shaped by one organism's ability to alter the chemistry of the ground itself. Some tree roots travel farther than the height of the tree itself. Although the trunk rises prominently above the ground, most of a tree's true presence lies hidden beneath the surface. In some species, the roots stretch outward many times farther than the canopy itself, radiating through the soil in search of moisture and minerals. These far-reaching roots probe cracks in rock, follow ancient subterranean pathways, and anchor themselves in deep layers where water remains stable even in severe drought. This expansive underground network gives the tree access to resources that smaller root systems could never reach. It also provides remarkable stability during storms. By spreading physical stress across a broad foundation, the roots prevent the tree from toppling even in powerful winds. For researchers, studying these deep, far-spreading structures reveals that the visible portion of a tree is only a small glimpse of its full footprint. The hidden extent of the roots defines much of its resilience and long-term survival. There are trees with roots that form living bridges over rivers. In certain regions with frequent flooding, communities have learned to guide the growth of particular tree roots across streams and riverbanks. These roots are flexible when young and can be directed over wooden frames or natural supports. As they grow thicker, they fuse together into strong, interwoven structures capable of carrying the weight of people and supplies. These living bridges continue to strengthen over time because the roots remain active and expand with every growing season. They resist rot, withstand heavy rainfall, and adapt to changing river dynamics in ways that man-made structures often cannot. The trees supporting these bridges do not lose stability because their remaining roots continue to anchor them firmly in the soil. The result is a structure that grows more durable with age, representing a rare collaboration between human guidance and natural growth. Certain trees use chemical signals to shape the behavior of nearby plants. When a tree occupies a territory, it does not simply stand in place. Through its roots and leaves, it releases compounds that drift through soil and air in quiet currents. These substances can slow the germination of certain seeds, encourage the growth of others, or shift the direction of neighboring roots. In some cases, the chemical influence reaches far enough to create distinct patterns across the forest floor. One side of the tree may support thriving undergrowth, while the opposite side remains sparse due to subtle chemical gradients. Smaller plants respond by adjusting how they grow, how quickly they produce leaves, or how far their roots explore. Over many seasons, these invisible boundaries reshape the community around the tree, creating zones of cooperation and zones of competition. The result is an ecosystem that reflects the decisions of its tallest members. The forest becomes a landscape written partly in soil and partly in chemistry. Some trees release scents that influence the moods of animals and people. In the presence of certain trees, the air takes on a quality that feels calming, even before the scent becomes noticeable. This comes from natural compounds produced by leaves, bark, and resins that drift into the environment. These compounds interact with the nervous systems of animals that breathe them in, lowering stress levels and encouraging slower heart rhythms. Birds settle more easily in branches exposed to these scents. Mammals behave more calmly in these areas, often choosing to rest or forage near these trees, even when food is more abundant elsewhere. Humans experience this effect as well. Studies of forest environments show that time spent near these species can influence mood, reduce tension, and create a sense of mental clarity. These benefits arise not from symbolism, but from the chemistry released into the air. The tree shapes not only the physical structure of the forest, but also the emotional tone of the life within it. A few trees can modify the temperature of their flowers to attract pollinators. During the brief window when pollination must occur, some species raise the internal temperature of their flowers above that of the surrounding air. This warming draws insects and small animals that seek heat during cooler periods of the day. Inside the flower, metabolic processes activate and release energy that flows outward as gentle wards. Pollinators rest on the petals or dive toward the heat source, gaining comfort while transferring pollen in the process. This strategy also helps the tree release scent molecules more efficiently, spreading them through the air at a faster rate. The flower becomes not only a source of food, but also a temporary refuge. Over generations, this temperature control has helped these species succeed, even in regions where core mornings might limit the activity of insects. The ability to generate warmth at the precise moment it is needed gives the tree a significant advantage in reproduction. Some trees can sense when they are being eaten. The moment an insect bites into a leaf, the plant experiences a physical and chemical signal that differs from harmless environmental wear. Special receptor cells recognize the exact combination of pressure, saliva, and tissue damage. These receptors trigger pathways that activate defensive processes. Within minutes, compounds begin to form in the wounded area, making the leaf less appealing. The tree may also shift resources away from the damaged section and reinforce other parts of the canopy. In some cases, the signal travels through the internal transport system and alerts distant branches that have not yet been touched. Those untouched leaves begin defensive preparations in advance. The entire tree adjusts its internal priorities based on the specific nature of the attack. This sensitivity allows it to react with precision, conserving energy while protecting itself from further harm. The response is rapid for a large organism that usually moves in slow patterns. Trees can rewrite their growth patterns in response to sound and vibration. Although trees do not possess ears, they can detect vibrations in the environment through the movement of their tissues. When certain frequencies pass through the trunk or leaves, the cells react by altering growth direction or adjusting how quickly new tissue forms. Experiments have shown that vibrations from wind, water flow, and even the movement of animals can influence how roots spread through the soil. Some roots become thicker in areas of frequent vibration, anchoring the tree more firmly. Others explore quieter regions where competition for resources may be lower. Branches also respond by shifting angles or reinforcing growth along lines that match the surrounding conditions. Over many seasons, these subtle adjustments accumulate into a pattern that reflects the physical soundtrack of the forest. The tree grows not only in response to light and water, but also to the quiet signals carried through the air and ground. Some trees grow in spirals that follow invisible environmental forces. A spiral growth pattern may appear decorative, yet it often reflects the influence of factors that are not immediately visible. Trees exposed to consistent wind from a particular direction may twist as they grow to distribute stress more evenly through the trunk. Others align themselves with patterns of sunlight or magnetic fields, creating slow rotations that continue year after year. The spiral is not a random flourish. It is a structural adaptation that improves stability, water transport, and resistance to breaking under pressure. Inside the trunk, the arrangement of fibers reflects this twist, forming a complex lattice that responds efficiently to tension. When researchers study these trees, they find that the spiral pattern often matches long-term environmental conditions far more accurately than weather records. The shape of the trunk becomes a map of the forces that shaped it. A few trees can tilt themselves back upright after falling. When storms or shifting soil cause a young tree to lean, the plant does not simply accept its new orientation. Cells on one side of the trunk begin to divide more rapidly than those on the opposite side. This uneven growth creates pressure that slowly pushes the trunk back toward a vertical position. The process may take several seasons, yet it continues as long as the living tissues remain active. Roots also respond by extending more vigorously on the side opposite the tilt, creating a counterweight that stabilizes the recovering tree. Over time, the trunk regains its balance and the canopy reorients itself toward the sky. In older trees, this ability may be less pronounced, but younger individuals can perform remarkable corrections. Some eventually stand straight, even after being pushed nearly to the ground. Some trees generate electricity through tiny internal chemical reactions. Within the tissues of certain species, natural gradients of ions create small electrical currents as part of normal metabolic activity. These currents help power internal transport systems that move nutrients and water from roots to leaves. They also guide the behavior of membranes that separate different types of cells. Although the electrical output is extremely small, it is measurable. Scientists can attach sensors to the bark and record fluctuations that correspond to changes in light, temperature, or soil moisture. These electrical patterns help researchers study tree health and environmental stress. In nature, the currents help regulate growth by coordinating activities across different parts of the tree. The trunk, branches, and roots all rely on this steady internal flow to maintain communication within the organism. While the electrical energy is not used in the way animals use nerve signals, it serves as an essential part of the tree's internal coordination. There are trees that grow bark so strong it can stop small fires. In fire-prone environments, the bark of certain species develops into a thick, protective layer that shields the living tissues inside. This bark contains dense materials that resist heat and slow the movement of flames across the trunk. When a low fire sweeps through, the outer bark chars but prevents the heat from reaching the vulnerable inner layers. Inside the trunk, moisture remains stable, and the cambium continues functioning. Even after repeated exposure to fire, these trees preserve enough of their vital tissues to regrow leaves and branches. Over time, many individuals accumulate patterns of darkened bark that show how often they have survived fire events. These marks reveal the resilience built into the species, a kind of living archive of environmental challenges that the tree has overcome. Some trees shed bark deliberately to remove parasites. Shedding bark is not always a sign of damage. For some species, it is a controlled process that serves as a defense against organisms that attempt to colonize the outer surface. As the bark loosens, insects, fungi, and lichens that depend on a stable surface lose their attachment and fall away. The new bark that forms beneath is clean and less likely to carry harmful organisms. In warm regions, this shedding also protects the tree from intense sunlight by revealing lighter colored bark that reflects heat more effectively. The timing of bark loss is precise, occurring only when the new layer is ready to take over. This cycle continues for the entire life of the tree, creating patterns on the trunk that show how often renewal has taken place. The process helps the tree maintain a healthy outer surface while adapting to the challenges of its environment. A few species have bark that peels in rainbow patterns. In certain climates where sunlight, humidity, and rapid growth intersect, some trees renew their outer bark in thin sections that peel away layer by layer. Beneath each removed section lies a fresh surface with pigments that have not yet been exposed to air. These pigments may appear bright green at first, then shift into shades of blue, orange, or red as the surface matures. Over time, the entire trunk becomes a mosaic of colors that change continuously as new bark appears and old bark weathers. This cycle does more than create beauty. By peeling frequently, the tree removes organisms that try to settle on its surface. The exposed bark also regulates moisture more effectively by presenting younger and more flexible tissue to the environment. In regions with intense rainfall, this peeling helps prevent water from trapping harmful microbes against the trunk. The rainbow appearance is a sign of constant renewal, each color marking a moment in the ongoing life of the tree. Some trees grow wood dense enough to sink in water. Across tropical forests, there are species whose wood is so tightly packed with material that it falls when placed in a river or lake. This density comes from extremely slow growth in environments where nutrients favor compact structural tissues over lighter ones. The wood supports incredible weight without bending and withstands impacts that would damage softer species. Inside the trunk, the cells have thick walls that leave very little empty space, giving the tree a strength that rivals certain engineered materials. This density also protects the wood from insects that struggle to chew through it. Builders in some regions have used these trees for tools and structures that must endure constant stress, because the wood resists both deformation and decay. These trees grow slowly, but each year adds a layer of remarkable strength that makes the trunk a long-lasting and nearly unbreakable presence in its ecosystem. Certain trees produce wood with natural medicinal properties. Some species store unique compounds inside their heartwood that form as the tree matures. These compounds can discourage fungal growth, repel insects, or preserve the wood long after the tree has fallen. When the wood is cut or scraped, the aroma hints at a complex blend of natural chemicals that the tree once used to defend its inner tissues. These same substances can influence the surrounding environment. Leaves that fall from these trees may alter the soil chemistry in ways that help them resist harmful microbes. People have long noticed that areas near these trees experience slower rates of decay in organic matter or noticeably fewer pests. Scientists studying the wood find that these compounds differ from species to species and often evolve in response to local threats. The tree builds its own pharmacy inside its trunk, turning defense into long-lasting resilience. Some trees make leaves that change shape as they grow older. When young leaves first form, they often appear in shapes that maximize protection from sun exposure or minimize water loss. These juvenile forms may look completely different from the mature leaves on the same tree. As the tree gains height and stability, the shape of its leaves shifts to optimize light capture, airflow, or temperature control. In some species, the transformation helps discourage animals that prefer tender leaf tissue, because the mature form becomes tougher or less appealing. In others, the shape change improves the tree's resistance to wind by reducing drag. These transitions occur gradually as each new wave of growth produces slightly altered forms. Over time, the canopy becomes a mixture of shapes that reflect every stage of development. This ability to change leaf design allows the tree to adapt to new challenges at each point in its life. A few trees can fold their leaves in response to touch. Some species possess leaves with specialized cells that change internal pressure when stimulated by movement. A light touch triggers these cells to release water into surrounding tissues, causing the leaf to collapse inward or fold along a central line. This response happens far more quickly than most plant movements, shielding the leaf from insects, raindrops, or sudden gusts of wind. The mechanism requires no sound-based sensing. It depends entirely on mechanical changes detected within the leaf's own tissues. Once the disturbance passes, the cells gradually rebuild their internal pressure, and the leaf slowly unfolds back to its original position. The ability to fold protects the plant from physical damage, and also deters herbivores that prefer stable, motionless surfaces. Each fold is a brief act of defense, a momentary retreat that helps preserve the leaf's delicate structure. Some trees extend this protection even further by producing sticky surfaces that form natural insect traps. A few species produce leaves or branches coated with a thin layer of adhesive fluid. This substance forms as part of the tree's normal defense system and creates surfaces that can trap small insects before they reach vital tissues. When insects land or crawl across the sticky area, they become immobilized and cannot continue feeding. Over time, the trapped insects decompose and add minute nutrient traces to the surface of the tree. While these trees are not considered carnivorous, the presence of these sticky layers shapes the behavior of insect populations around them. Fewer pests reach the inner leaves. Birds and other animals often take advantage of the trapped insects as an easy food source, forming a small ecological relationship based on the adhesive coating. The tree gains protection through a passive method that requires no movement or energy. Once the coating is produced, certain trees can grow leaves that mimic the plants around them, in environments where standing out would attract herbivores. Some trees have evolved leaves that resemble those of surrounding species. This resemblance includes shape, texture, and sometimes even color. The tree accomplishes this through subtle genetic adjustments that activate when the plant senses the chemical presence of nearby vegetation. The developing leaves are dogged features associated with other plants, allowing the tree to blend into the background. Herbivores, searching by sight or by familiarity, overlook the disguised leaves and move on. This ability to mimic creates a form of camouflage that changes depending on which species occupy the surrounding area. In regions where plant communities shift regularly, the tree may adjust its leaf morphology with each new season. The result is a plant that alters its appearance in response to the broader environment. Some trees have leaves that track the movement of the sun. Throughout the day, certain species rotate their leaves to follow the path of sunlight across the sky. Small cells at the base of each leaf change shape as internal pressure shifts in response to light intensity. This movement positions the leaf so that it captures the maximum amount of energy at each moment. When evening arrives, the leaves often return to a neutral orientation to reduce water loss overnight. This tracking behavior improves the efficiency of photosynthesis and allows the tree to thrive, even in regions where cloud cover or tall neighbors limit available light. The movement is subtle, yet over the course of a day, the leaves may sweep across a wide arc. The tree benefits by adjusting continuously to the changing sky, rather than relying on a fixed position. A few species produce flowers that bloom only once in many years. Some trees accumulate resources for long periods before committing to a single, massive flowering event. During these waiting years, the tree strengthens its root system, expands its canopy, and stores energy within its trunk. When conditions finally align, the tree releases an extraordinary burst of flowers within a short window of time. The event attracts pollinators from far distances, as the scent and color of the blooms fill the surrounding environment. After the flowering is complete, many of these species focus entirely on fruit production. The fruits often mature quickly and carry seeds that spread across large areas. This strategy ensures that the next generation begins life under ideal circumstances. The long build-up to a single flowering event allows the tree to maximize its reproductive success, even in unpredictable climates. Some trees can switch between male and female flowering. In certain species, the form of the flowers produced by a tree changes depending on environmental conditions, internal energy levels, or population needs. A tree may produce male flowers during seasons when resources are limited, because creating pollen requires less energy. During years with abundant sunlight and water, the same tree may produce female flowers that are more costly to develop. This flexibility allows the species to maintain stable reproduction across varying conditions. It also helps balance the ratio of male and female flowers within a population, without requiring separate individuals. Over time, the switching pattern contributes to a resilient reproductive system that adapts to long-term changes in climate or habitat structure. The ability to shift roles within the same organism reveals a level of plasticity rarely seen in large plants. Certain trees change sex depending on environmental conditions. In these remarkable species, the type of flower produced depends on signals the tree gathers from the world around it. When sunlight weakens or nutrients run low, the tree shifts toward the less demanding reproductive form, conserving energy while still participating in pollination. When water is plentiful and the canopy receives strong light, the tree redirects its strength into producing flowers that will carry seeds into the next generation. This ability gives the species a flexible strategy that prevents entire populations from failing during harsh years.
Even neighboring individuals may adopt different reproductive roles depending on slight differences in soil quality or shade. Over many seasons, this shifting behavior creates a natural balance within the forest, allowing reproduction to remain stable even as conditions rise and fall. The tree does not commit to a single role. Instead, it responds intelligently to the changing landscape. Some trees use ultraviolet patterns on their flowers to guide pollinators. These floral patterns appear simple to human eyes, yet under ultraviolet light, they reveal detailed markings that stand out boldly to insects. The designs function like signs that point directly toward pollen and nectar, helping pollinators land accurately and feed efficiently. Bees and other visitors use these cues to distinguish one species from another, even when many flowers bloom in the same area.
The patterns can form rings, centered highlights, or radiating streaks that match the habits of the animals that visit them most often. By providing clear guidance, the tree increases its chance of successful pollination and reduces the energy wasted on visitors that might otherwise wander across the petals without transferring pollen. These ultraviolet features evolve gradually as trees and pollinators influence one another across countless generations. The result is a partnership built on signals that humans can only see with special equipment. A few trees produce fruits that rely on only one animal species to disperse them. In these highly specialized relationships, the tree shapes its fruit to match the feeding style, digestive process, and movement patterns of a single animal. The fruit may be tough enough to withstand chewing, but soft enough to release seeds only after passing through a particular digestive system. Sometimes the scent, taste, and even timing of ripening match the habits of that one creature. When the animal travels through the forest, the seeds are carried within its body and deposited far from the parent tree, often in locations rich with nutrients. This exclusive partnership creates a powerful but fragile bond. The tree depends completely on the animal to spread its offspring, and the animal in turn benefits from the reliable food source. Over long periods of evolution, both partners become tightly linked, forming a connection that shapes the structure of entire ecosystems. Some trees create fruits with chemical signals that tell animals when they are ripe. As the fruit matures, it releases a changing blend of scents that drift outward into the forest. Animals capable of detecting these chemical shifts use them as reliable cues that the fruit has reached peak nutrition. Long before the color fully deepens or the skin softens, the scent announces that the seeds inside are ready to be carried away. This timing matters because the seeds must be eaten exactly when they are developed enough to survive digestion. If the fruit is taken too early, the seeds may be damaged. If it falls too late, the opportunity for dispersal decreases. By coordinating chemical signals with internal development, the tree ensures that animals arrive at the perfect moment. The forest responds in predictable waves as scent-sensitive creatures gather, feast, and move outward with the next generation hidden within them. Certain tree fruits can lie dormant for years before sprouting. These fruits contain seeds protected by thick outer layers that resist moisture and breakdown. The tree produces this barrier to prevent the seed from germinating during unfavorable seasons. The soil around them may dry, flood, freeze, or shift repeatedly. Yet the seed waits patiently for the perfect combination of warmth, moisture, and microbial activity, it signals a safe beginning. During this extended rest, it remains attuned to subtle environmental shifts through chemical signals that pass through its outer coat. When the surrounding soil finally stabilizes, enzymes activate and begin softening the protective shell. The seed then absorbs water and sends out its first root, anchoring itself in soil that has at last become hospitable. This strategy of dormancy protects the species through unpredictable climates, allowing survival even when many years pass before the right moment arrives. Some trees depend on fire itself to trigger the release of their seeds. In fire-adapted landscapes, these trees bear combs or pods that remain tightly sealed under cold conditions. The structures contain resins or natural glues that soften only when exposed to the intense heat of a passing blaze. When flames sweep through and remove competing vegetation, the cones open and drop seeds onto nutrient-rich ash. This creates ideal conditions for rapid growth. As sunlight now reaches the soil unobstructed and minerals become more available, the seeds germinate quickly in this newly cleared space, taking advantage of reduced competition. This strategy allows the species to flourish in regions where fire is not a destructive force, but a recurring event that shapes the rhythm of the ecosystem. Instead of fearing fire, these trees use it as an essential part of their life cycle. A few trees use explosive mechanisms to launch their seeds great distances. These trees develop pods that dry unevenly, creating tension within the plant tissue. As moisture escapes, the outer walls bend and twist until the built-up strain reaches a breaking point. When the pod finally splits, the sudden release sends seeds flying outward with remarkable speed. Some land nearby while others travel far enough to escape the shadow of the parent tree entirely. This launching method spreads offspring across many types of terrain, increasing the chances that at least some seedlings will take root in favorable soil. The explosive energy does not require any animal or wind assistance, making it an independent and reliable dispersal method. Over time, entire groves can form from one well-placed burst that sends seeds into hidden corners of the landscape. Some trees make seeds that ride air currents for astonishing lengths of time. These seeds develop wings, fibers, or papery structures that transform them into natural gliders. As they detach from the tree, they begin to spin or drift, catching even the gentlest currents with ease. The lightweight design allows them to rise above leaf litter, clear the canopy, and travel across open spaces. Some drift for hours before settling. During their journey, the seeds encounter a variety of microclimates, from cool shaded valleys to bright open ridges. This wide exploration increases the likelihood that they will land in soil suited to their needs. Evolution shapes every contour of these airborne structures, refining them so they remain stable in unpredictable winds. The tree benefits by spreading its offspring far beyond what gravity alone would permit. Certain trees form seeds that can survive long journeys across oceans. These coastal species produce buoyant seeds with thick, watertight shells that protect the inner embryo from salt and decay. Once released, the seeds enter rivers, tidal pools, or shoreline waves and drift outward into open water. Ocean currents carry them across great distances, sometimes depositing them on distant islands or shorelines weeks or months later. During their voyage, the seeds remain viable because their protective coating keeps the interior dry and insulated. When they finally reach land, fresh water softens the shell and triggers the first stages of germination. This dispersal method allows the species to colonize new regions, cross natural barriers, and maintain genetic diversity across widely separated landscapes. Entire coastal forests have grown from seeds that once floated through vast stretches of open sea. Some trees produce sap that hardens into natural fossils over centuries. When these trees experience wounds or stress, they release resin that captures small particles from the surrounding environment. As time passes, the resin thickens, hardens, and becomes buried within sediment or soil. Pressure and chemical changes gradually transform it into a durable substance that can preserve insects, plant fragments, and tiny traces of ancient ecosystems. These natural fossils remain stable for tremendous spans of time, offering scientists rare glimpses into forests that existed long before modern species developed.
The hardened material protects delicate structures that would otherwise decay, creating clear snapshots of life as it once appeared. Through this slow process, the tree becomes an unwitting archivist, recording the fine details of its world in a material capable of surviving far beyond the lifespan of the organism itself. A few trees create resins that preserve insects perfectly. When the bark of these trees breaks open, a protective resin seeps outward in slow shining beads that cling to everything they touch. Small insects wandering across the wound become caught instantly, held in place by a substance that grips each tiny limb and hair. What would normally decay within hours becomes sealed away from air and moisture. Over time, the resin grows harder and more transparent, wrapping the insect in a flawless shell that protects even the most delicate structures. Wing veins, fragile eyes, pollen grains, and mouth parts remain intact as the resin ages. Long after storms, seasons, and entire generations of animals pass, the preserved creature stays suspended in perfect clarity. These preserved moments allow scientists to study tiny species that might otherwise vanish entirely from the record. The tree does not set out to capture the insect. Its only goal is to seal a wound. Yet, in performing this simple act of protection, it becomes a guardian of ancient detail, offering glimpses into life that once clung to its bark. Some tree saps can flow upward against gravity in surprising ways. Inside these trees, narrow tubes form continuous corridors from roots to the highest twigs, allowing sap to travel without any mechanical pump. The movement begins when sunlight warms the leaves and water evaporates through tiny pores, pulling on the entire column of liquid below. The bond between water molecules keeps the column intact, even as it climbs stunning heights. When evening cools, the canopy and evaporation slows. Pressure, deep within the roots, pushes fresh sap upward, restoring what was lost during the day. This upward movement delivers minerals from the soil to every living cell, while carrying chemical signals that coordinate growth across branches and buds. The process remains invisible to anyone standing beneath the tree, yet it powers the expansion of leaves, the healing of bark, and the rise of blossoms each season. It is one of the most elegant forms of natural engineering, fueled only by sunlight, structure, and the subtle physics of water. There are trees whose sap glows faintly in the dark. In rare forests, a cut branch or scraped patch of bark may reveal a soft radiance that unfolds as daylight fades. This glow forms when natural chemicals in the sap react with oxygen, or when tiny organisms living within the fluid produce light as part of their metabolism. The result is a gentle shimmer that clings to the wound like a ghostly veil. It is never bright enough to illuminate the forest floor, yet it becomes visible in the quiet hours of true darkness. Insects sometimes gather near the glow, drawn by its faint presence or avoiding it altogether depending on how they interpret the signal. Researchers study these glowing patches to understand the chemistry hidden within the sap and the microscopic partners living inside it. The light requires just the right balance of moisture, temperature, and biological activity, which makes each luminous spot a rare and fascinating collaboration between tree, air, and life too small to see. Some trees produce aromatic compounds that linger in the air for hours. As sunlight warms their leaves and bark, these trees release a complex blend of airborne oils that drift outward and saturate the forest with scent.
The fragrance may travel far beyond the canopy, shaping the movement of insects, birds, and mammals. Pollinating species often follow these airborne trails to hidden flowers guided by a mixture of sweet, sharp, or reinous notes. Herbivores may avoid trees whose aromas signal strong chemical defenses. Even the soil community responds as falling leaves carry these compounds into the ground, where they influence microbial activity. For humans, walking beneath the branches, the scent feels calming or invigorating. Yet each note is part of a larger chemical conversation that evolved long before people appeared. The lingering aromatic cloud continues through still air long after sunset, quietly influencing the choices of countless creatures passing through the forest. Certain trees can change the chemical makeup of their sap after injury. When bark splits or insects chew through delicate tissues, the tree rapidly alters the mixture flowing through its vessels. Defensive compounds rise in concentration near the wound, forming a chemical barrier that slows the progress of microbes and deters further feeding. Some substances thicken to seal damaged channels, while others break down invading organisms before they can reach deeper tissues. These changes radiate outward, alerting nearby cells and shifting the tree's internal priorities so that repair takes precedence over growth. Once the wound stabilizes and new tissue begins forming, the sap gradually returns to its normal balance. The transformation happens quietly, yet reveals a responsive intelligence in the way the tree protects itself. Rather than relying on a single defense, it reshapes its internal chemistry to match the challenge in front of it. Some trees host microscopic life that depends entirely on their sap. Within the flowing liquid that carries nutrients upward, entire communities of bacteria and yeasts find a complete and sheltered home. These tiny organisms drift along the sap's path, gathering in places where conditions are warm, stable, and rich with dissolved sugars. Many of them contribute positively to the tree by breaking down waste materials or producing compounds that enhance growth and defense. Others create subtle shifts in the chemistry of the sap, helping the tree respond to stress or changes in weather. The tree's immune system keeps these populations balanced, allowing helpful organisms to thrive while keeping harmful ones under control. Over long periods, the microorganisms adapt so closely to their host that they cannot survive outside the tree's vessels. Their entire existence unfolds within narrow channels of moving liquid, experiencing day and night through changes in pressure and temperature alone. A few trees can create habitats inside hollow trunks without dying. As certain trees age, the dense heartwood near the center of the trunk begins to break down naturally, leaving behind a hollow core. The living portion of the tree remains just beneath the bark, forming a ring of active tissue that continues to transport water and nutrients. This allows the tree to stand tall, even while the interior becomes an open space large enough to shelter animals. Birds, small mammals, reptiles, and insects all find refuge inside the protected darkness, especially during storms or extreme heat. Moisture collects on the inner walls, encouraging mosses and fungi that create additional layers of habitat. The tree adapts by reinforcing the outer wood, strengthening it to compensate for the missing center. These hollow dwellings can persist for decades, turning the tree into both a thriving organism and a living shelter for entire communities. Some trees naturally shape themselves into perfect homes for animals, without any outside help. Certain species grow limbs, curves, and chambers that line up exactly with the needs of forest wildlife. Broad branches create resting platforms for birds. Gently cupped intersections between limbs become ideal nesting places that remain dry even during heavy rain. Twisted roots form sheltered spaces where small mammals hide from predators. These shapes emerge simply because the tree follows patterns of light and gravity. Yet the resulting architecture serves countless creatures. As animals reuse these features year after year, the tree becomes a familiar landmark in their territories. Birdsong, scent marks, and nesting materials all gather around it, weaving the tree into the daily lives of the forest. What appears to be an accidental arrangement of wood becomes, through use and repetition, a vital structure in the broader living network. Certain trees grow hollows that become entire ecosystems of their own, where cavities form in trunks or large branches. Rainwater, drifting seeds, fallen leaves, and fine soil gradually accumulate. Over time, the hollow transforms into a miniature forest environment with damp air, soft ground, and filtered light. Insects burrow into the decaying material, creating tunnels and chambers. Frogs and small reptiles slip into the puddles that form after storms. Fungi trace delicate threads through the softened wood, breaking it down into rich, organic matter. Sometimes, even small plants take root inside these elevated pockets, creating tiny gardens held aloft by the tree's living structure. As long as the outer trunk remains strong, the entire system thrives independently from the forest floor, complete with its own cycles of growth, decomposition, and renewal. Some trees can sense and respond to the weight of animals climbing them. Branches that experience repeated pressure gradually adjust their internal structure to handle the load. Cells on the underside of a bending limb grow thicker, strengthening the wood where stress is greatest. Upper layers may stretch and adapt, ensuring the branch remains flexible without snapping. Over many seasons, well-traveled roots become noticeably sturdier than unused ones, forming natural pathways through the canopy that support regular visitors. In younger trees, sudden heavy weight may tilt the trunk, triggering slow but steady growth corrections that guide the tree back toward balance. Even leaf arrangement can shift around busy branches, spacing out surfaces so they avoid tearing when animals move past. These long-term changes reveal that the tree is constantly listening to its physical world, interpreting pressure as information and translating it into enduring structural decisions. A few trees form symbiotic partnerships with birds that protect their branches. When certain birds choose a tree as their long-term refuge, the relationship grows into something far deeper than simple shelter. Nest building, feeding, and resting all take place among the branches, and the constant presence of wings and calls creates a protective zone that deters many threats. Insects that would chew through new leaves are eaten before they can become a problem. Browsing animals avoid trees filled with vigilant eyes that sound alarms at the slightest hint of movement. Over time, the birds learn every curve and hollow of the canopy, reacting instantly to anything unusual. Their droppings enrich the soil around the roots, feeding microorganisms that support the tree's growth. The tree responds by offering sturdy limbs, seasonal food sources, and safe vantage points that make it worth returning year after year. In forests where storms and predators constantly reshape the balance of life, these partnerships act like small alliances of survival, each partner amplifying the strengths of the other. Some trees rely on bats for pollination and seed dispersal, As daylight fades and the canopy darkens, certain trees begin releasing scents that travel easily through cool evening air. These fragrances bloom when the rest of the forest quiets, guiding hungry bats toward flowers that open only at night. When the visitors feed, their fur gathers pollen grains that adhere gently to the fine hairs along their bodies. Their swift flight carries this pollen across long stretches of forest, allowing the tree to exchange genetic material far beyond the limits of daytime pollinators. Later in the season, when fruits ripen with a richness designed for nocturnal tastes, bats feed again and carry seeds within their digestive tracts. They release those seeds in places the tree could never reach on its own, often near water, in sheltered rock crevices, or along the edges of new clearings.
This long-distance partnership shapes entire landscapes, pushing new growth into untouched soil and ensuring the continuity of species that rely on the night for their survival. Some trees, however, depend not on nocturnal animals but on fish to disperse their seeds along flooded rivers. When seasonal waters rise, their fruits are lifted into gentle currents that flow through submerged forests. Drawn by the scent or texture of the floating fruit, fish bite into them, swallowing the soft pulp and unknowingly becoming seed carriers. As they swim through winding channels and shaded pools, they release the intact seeds, which drift downward and settle into new layers of silt, ready to take root in fresh ground. These deposits are rich with nutrients left behind by retreating floodwaters, making them ideal nurseries for young seedlings. The trees do not rely on wind or birds for their spread. Instead, they harness the movement of river life, trusting that fish will transport their future generations to new and fertile ground. Over many cycles, this partnership carves out long corridors of vegetation that follow the river's paths. Entire floodplain forests owe their structure to this quiet cooperation between moving water, swimming creatures, and trees that learn to let the river carry their future. Some trees have roots that grow above water to breathe air. In wetlands where soils remain soaked for long periods, the ground becomes starved of oxygen, making ordinary roots struggle to function. To survive, certain trees send parts of their root systems upward, lifting them into the open air where gases can flow freely. These specialized structures act almost like living chimneys, drawing oxygen down into the submerged tissues that need it most. The raised roots often form intricate shapes, rising in clusters or arching above the water's surface. Their presence changes the entire ecosystem around them by creating shelter for aquatic animals and stabilizing soft mud that would otherwise shift with every current. Even in storms, the exposed roots remain strong, absorbing shock while continuing to exchange gases. This adaptation allows the trees to thrive where others cannot, turning swamps and marshes into vibrant forests filled with unique species that depend on the breathing roots for both structure and shelter. A few trees build massive root networks that anchor coastlines. Along the edges of continents and islands, certain trees expand their roots outward in sprawling tangles that hold soil in place against the pull of tides and storms. These roots branch repeatedly, forming barriers that trap drifting sand and sediment. As the network grows denser, entire stretches of shoreline become more stable, resisting erosion that would otherwise wash away habitat for countless organisms. Fish spawn among the underwater roots, birds nest above them, and crustaceans burrow into the newly anchored ground. When strong winds drive waves toward the coast, the roots distribute the force through their vast web, protecting inland regions from damage. Over many generations, these trees can build out into shallow water, creating new land inch by inch as their roots accumulate more sediment. The coastline evolves with them, shaped by a living structure that remains flexible yet strong enough to withstand some of the harshest conditions on Earth.
Some trees purify water by filtering minerals through their roots. As water travels through the soil and into the root system, these trees draw it through a series of membranes that capture excess minerals, metals, and natural compounds. This filtration process protects the tree from harmful concentrations, but it also transforms the surrounding environment.
Cleaned water releases back into nearby streams, ponds, or groundwater, supporting healthier conditions for fish, amphibians, and plants. Soil around the roots becomes more stable and balanced, creating pockets of life where delicate species can take hold. When heavy rains wash debris and nutrients into the ground, the tree moderates the flow, preventing sudden changes that would disrupt the ecosystem. Over time, entire landscapes benefit from these filtering roots. They create natural purification systems that improve clarity in waterways, reduce harmful buildup in wetlands, and support thriving communities of organisms that depend on stable, healthy water to breathe, survive. Certain trees stabilize mountainsides and shape entire landscapes. On steep slopes, where erosion threatens to drag soil downward with every heavy rain, these trees send deep roots into fractures and crevices, binding loose earth into a cohesive mass.
Their roots weave through layers of rock and gravel, forming nets that hold everything in place. When storms arrive, the canopy intercepts much of the rainfall, slowing its descent and giving the soil time to absorb moisture without collapsing. Over decades, this stabilizing effect allows delicate understory plants to establish themselves in places that would otherwise crumble away. Streams that flow down the mountain run clearer because less sediment is washed into them. Animals use the anchored ground to travel safely across steep terrain. Entire valleys owe their shape to these quiet architects. Without them, mountainsides would slide more often and ecosystems below would struggle to survive under the weight of continuous landslides. Some trees can grow on bare rock by slowly creating soil beneath them. Seeds that land on stoned edges or cliffsides often fail, yet these particular species have evolved roots that can wedge into the smallest cracks.
As the roots thicken, they pry apart the rock, grain by grain, opening new space.
Fallen leaves gather around the base of the young tree and gradually break down into organic matter. Rainwater pools in tiny depressions, carrying dust and minerals that accumulate around the roots. Over many seasons, a thin layer of soil begins to form. The tree anchors itself more firmly and expands its root system deeper into the widening cavities. Eventually, the once barren rock surface becomes a miniature ecosystem, complete with mosses, insects, and young seedlings that benefit from the first pioneer. Entire cliffside forests can trace their origin to a single tree, but manage to grip stone and slowly transform it into living ground. A few trees thrive in environments colder than freezing for most of the year. In regions where winter dominates the calendar, these trees carry a suite of adaptations that prevent their cells from rupturing when temperatures plunge. The water within their tissues becomes infused with natural compounds that lower its freezing point, allowing the cells to remain flexible even in extreme cold. Needles or leaves shrink and harden, reducing surface area so the tree loses less moisture to icy winds. Bark thickens into layered insulation that shields the delicate inner tissues from harsh weather. When snow piles around the base, it forms an additional blanket that protects the roots. Despite the long dark seasons, these trees continue slow internal processes that prepare them for the brief burst of summer growth. They stand as living markers of resilience, shaping ecosystems where few other large plants can survive, and offering shelter and stability to the animals that share their frozen world. Some trees survive extreme heat by cooling themselves from within. In scorching environments where air temperatures soar, these trees use their internal water reserves to control their own temperature. Tiny pores on the leaves release vapor in controlled patterns, creating a natural cooling effect similar to sweating.
This evaporative release draws heat away from the leaf surface and allows the tree to continue photosynthesis even when the surrounding air grows dangerously hot. Deep roots tap into underground water sources that remain cool and shielded from the sun. The tree channels this moisture upward, creating a gentle internal circulation that buffers the entire structure from overheating. Thick bark reflects sunlight and leaves may orient themselves to minimize direct exposure during the harshest hours. With these strategies working together, the tree remains stable in conditions that would wither most plants. It becomes a source of shade, moisture, and life in a landscape ruled by heat. Certain trees can withstand storms strong enough to bend their trunks permanently.
When fierce winds tear through a forest, some trees respond not by breaking, but by yielding in slow arcs that redistribute the stress across their entire structure. Their wood contains flexible fibers that compress on one side and stretch on the other, allowing the trunk to lean without snapping. As the storm settles, the tree does not immediately spring back. Instead, it evaluates the new forces acting on its shape. Growth tissues adjust cell by cell, adding support where the curve is greatest and reinforcing weakened areas. Over seasons, the leaning trunk becomes a stable new form, shaped by memory of the storm that bent it. Branches shift their angles to regain balance, sending leaves toward the sun in graceful sweeps that compensate for the altered posture. Forests, filled with such survivors, often carry silent histories in their silhouettes, each curve a record of past tempests that reshape the canopy while leaving life intact. Some trees grow thicker bark when they anticipate future fires. Signals from dry soil, intense sunlight, and rising temperatures can trigger internal changes that lead to a gradual strengthening of the outer bark. Layers accumulate more rapidly, creating a protective shield that insulates the living tissue beneath. This thick covering slows the advance of heat, allowing the tree to remain alive even when flames sweep across the forest floor. In some species, the bark cracks into wide plates that deflect heat upward rather than letting it penetrate deeply. As the lower layers shield the trunk, dormant buds hidden beneath the bark remain protected, ready to sprout fresh growth once the danger passes. Animals sheltering around the base rely on these resilient trunks as safe zones during fast-moving fires. Entire ecosystems shaped by frequent burns depend on these bark fortresses, which preserve old trees long enough to guide new generations after each blaze. A few trees increase their root strength in response to heavy winds. When strong gusts tug repeatedly at the trunk, sensors in the wood and roots detect shifting pressure. The tree responds by thickening underground supports and expanding the fine network that grips the surrounding soil. Roots begin to coil around stones, anchor deeper into compacted layers, and widen their base of support. Even the chemical composition of the roots may change, forming tougher tissues that resist tearing. Above ground, the trunk grows wood that resists twisting, while branches adjust their angles to reduce leverage during future storms. Over many seasons of wind exposure, the tree becomes increasingly anchored, turning into a steadfast presence, even in open or exposed landscapes. Birds and small animals often choose these wind-hardened trees as nesting sites, sensing the stability they provide. What began as a threat becomes a signal the tree uses to refine its strength. Some trees develop resistance to pests within a single generation. When insects feed aggressively on young leaves or burrow through bark, the tree begins producing new defensive chemicals designed to disrupt the attackers. These substances may make the leaves less nutritious, impair digestion, or deter feeding through powerful aromas. Remarkably, the tree can pass this heightened readiness to its seeds, giving the next generation a head start in environments where certain pests are common. This means seedlings begin life already possessing the improved defenses that their parent developed under stress. Over time, Forests shaped by recurring insect pressure become mosaics of trees that have each learned from previous assaults. The dynamic relationship between plant and pest becomes an ongoing conversation, with each new generation of trees adjusting its chemistry based on the challenges its ancestors endured. Certain trees evolve new leaf chemistry within local populations. Across a wide forest, trees of the same species may experience very different conditions. Some grow in dry ridges, others in moist valleys, others in bright clearings. These variations influence which chemical compounds become most useful for survival. Over time, populations in each microenvironment adjust their leaf chemistry to meet their unique challenges. Trees in dry areas may produce compounds that retain moisture or reflect more sunlight. Trees in shady zones may shift toward pigments that capture faint light more efficiently. These changes can become so distinct that two groups of the same species, living only a short distance apart, develop different chemical profiles. Insects and animals respond to these differences as well, forming localized relationships based on the specific chemistry they encounter. Each cluster of trees becomes a small experiment in adaptation, shaped by the subtle differences of its surroundings.
Some tree species can hybridize to create entirely new forms. When compatible species grow near one another, their pollen may mix on the wind or through visiting pollinators. If the resulting seeds take root, they can develop into individuals that blend traits from both parents. These hybrids may grow with surprising vigor, combining the resilience of one species with the growth habits of another. Some inherit tolerance for cold from one parent and rapid leaf production from the other, allowing them to thrive in new environments. Over time, these hybrids may form stable populations and even diverge further from their ancestors. Forests with many closely related species often become rich laboratories of natural experimentation. Hybrid trees introduce fresh genetic combinations that reshape everything from canopy structure to flowering patterns. The forest becomes a shifting tapestry, woven from both ancient lineages and newly emerging forms. A few trees carry genetic memories of past environmental events. Deep within the DNA of certain species lie instructions shaped by storms, droughts, and disease outbreaks that occurred long before the current generation stood tall. These genetic memories guide how the tree responds to stress. If ancestors endured prolonged dryness, descendants may sprout leaves that conserve water more effectively. If ancient fire swept through the region, seedlings may develop thicker bark sooner in life. These inherited traits allow the species to anticipate challenges, even when conditions cycle unpredictably. The tree does not remember in a conscious sense. Instead, the memory is encoded in patterns of growth, chemical production, and timing. Forests filled with such lineages carry the accumulated wisdom of centuries, responding to each season not as isolated individuals, but as heirs to long histories of survival. Some trees can store more carbon than entire fields of vegetation. Massive trunks, deep roots, and dense wood allow certain species to hold extraordinary amounts of carbon within their bodies. Each year, as leaves pull carbon dioxide from the air, the trees convert it into long-lasting structures that remain stable for decades or even centuries. While smaller plants also store carbon, the sheer size and longevity of these trees give them unmatched capacity. Their roots extend far into the soil, adding organic matter that becomes buried and preserved. When forests of these giants grow together, they create immense reservoirs that slow the accumulation of carbon in the atmosphere. Animals, fungi, and microorganisms all rely on the stability these trees bring to the ecosystem. Yet, the climate benefit they provide reaches far beyond their immediate surroundings. Certain forests of trees regulate regional climates. When vast stands of trees release moisture through their leaves, they add humidity to the air that rises and forms clouds.
These clouds influence where rain falls and how storms move across a landscape. Canopies also moderate temperature by shading the ground and cooling the air beneath them. Wind patterns shift as air flows around and through the forest, creating localized breezes that guide weather across valleys and plains. Over long periods, forests help determine the timing of seasonal rains and the stability of regional climates. The presence or absence of such tree communities can alter entire weather systems, affecting everything from river flow to agricultural cycles. These living landscapes operate like enormous natural engines that balance heat, water, and air without any deliberate intention, simply through the collective behavior of countless trees acting together. Some trees act as natural air purifiers that remove pollutants. Leaves coated with microscopic pores draw in air and absorb harmful compounds that accumulate in developed or densely populated regions. Volatile chemicals become trapped in waxy leaf surfaces, while other pollutants dissolve in moisture that forms along the leaf edges. Inside the tissues, enzymes break down many of these substances into harmless components, but the tree can either store safely or release in altered forms that no longer pose a threat. Root systems also play a role filtering contaminants that move through soil water. Forests of these trees create zones of cleaner air that benefit both wildlife and people. The purification happens quietly and continuously as part of the tree's normal breathing and nutrient cycling. With every breeze that passes through the canopy, the air grows clearer, refreshed by the silent labor of leaves and roots. A few trees release compounds that create clouds under certain conditions. In warm sunlight, certain forests breathe out vapors rich with natural chemicals that rise into the air and bind with tiny particles drifting above the canopy. As these vapors accumulate, they create clusters of microscopic droplets that seed the formation of clouds. The process begins invisibly, long before any visible shape appears in the sky. Step by step, moisture gathers around these airborne compounds until faint, white veils begin to form high overhead. These clouds help cool the landscape by reflecting sunlight and encouraging rainfall that feeds the forest below. What appears to be ordinary weather is in part shaped by the continuous outbreath of these trees, which alter the atmosphere simply by living. Entire regions can experience more stable rainfall patterns because of these subtle exchanges between leaf and sky. The trees do not intend to influence the heavens, yet their chemistry becomes a quiet engine that helps regulate the rhythm of clouds and light. Some forests even shape the global movement of weather systems. Vast stretches of trees release moisture from their leaves, which rises, cools, and merges with distant air currents. As this moisture travels, it adds weight and humidity to winds that eventually carry it across continents and oceans. In some parts of the world, these forests act as anchors for storm tracks, influencing where rain falls and how often drought returns. The canopy slows the heating of the ground during the day and releases stored warmth at night, creating gentle differences in temperature that guide the direction of winds. Over long periods, these influences merge with larger atmospheric cycles. The forests become part of a global dialogue unfolding in the sky, affecting rainfall patterns far beyond their borders. Communities living thousands of miles away may feel the effects of the forest they have never seen through the arrival of timely rains or sudden shifts in seasonal storms. Each grove becomes a participant in a planetary system that depends on countless interactions between land and air. Certain trees shape the migration patterns of animals over long distances. Some species produce fruits, scents, or flowering cycles that align perfectly with the routes of migratory animals. These trees become dependable markers along the journeys of birds, mammals, and even insects that return year after year. When leaves flush with nutrients or flowers open in abundance, travelers find food and rest just when they need it most. In turn, the animals disperse seeds or carry pollen to distant regions. Entire migratory maps have formed around these botanical cues. Birds may change flight paths in anticipation of certain blossoms, while large mammals follow valley forests that provide consistent forage during seasonal travel. Even aquatic life responds when riverside trees drop fruits or seeds that float across water. The forest becomes a living corridor that guides movement across mountains, plains, and coastlines. Without these dependable botanical signals, many journeys would falter, and entire chains of migration would lose the rhythm that sustains them. Some trees rely on ancient relationships with insects that still persist today. Long before human history began, certain trees formed partnerships with insects that evolved alongside them. These insects learned the timing of flowering cycles, the chemistry of leaves, and the contours of bark where they shelter. In exchange, the trees receive pollination, protection, or nutrient exchange from their tiny partners. Even now, these relationships continue unchanged, despite countless shifts in climate and geography. When blossoms open, the insects respond instantly, as if guided by memory passed through generations. Some species know exactly how to drill into a flower to release pollen, while others defend the tree from leaf eaters or invading larvae. The entire interaction unfolds with precision, but comes only from long shared history. Each participant carries instincts carved by ages of mutual reliance. The forest becomes home to living relics of an ancient world, still performing roles that began long before the present landscape took shape. A few trees grow alongside fungi that cannot live without them. Beneath the forest floor, these trees form intimate partnerships with fungi that weave through the soil in delicate branching threads. The fungi wrap around or slip inside the tiniest root tips, drawing energy from the sugars the tree creates. In return, they deliver water and minerals gathered from far-reaching networks that extend beyond the tree's own roots. For the fungi, this arrangement is essential to survival. Without the tree's nourishment, they cannot sustain their sprawling underground systems. Yet the exchange benefits both sides. The fungi help the tree reach nutrients in poor soils, defend against harmful microorganisms, and adapt to shifting moisture levels. Together, they form a single functioning unit that extends beneath vast areas of woodland. Every step on the forest floor presses lightly upon this hidden partnership, a living architecture that connects tree to soil in ways that shape the entire ecosystem. Some trees develop long-term alliances with bacteria that help them grow. Inside their roots live clusters of bacteria that transform elements in the soil into forms the tree can readily use. These microscopic partners take gases from the surrounding earth and convert them into nutrients that feed the growing tree. In return, the bacteria receive steady shelter and a supply of carbohydrates. Over time, the relationship grows so fine-tuned that without these bacterial allies, the tree would fail to thrive even in ideal conditions. These bacteria inhabit specialized nodules or pockets within the roots, where the environment remains stable and rich. The tree adjusts its internal chemistry to maintain these safe chambers. When conditions shift above ground, the partnership adapts below, altering nutrient flow or expanding bacterial colonies as needed. This collaboration supports entire forests by enriching the soil and allowing trees to survive in places that would otherwise be too poor or too harsh for sustained growth. Certain trees rely on species that are found nowhere else on Earth. Some forests hold relationships so specific that a single tree species may depend on a single animal, insect, or fungus, found only within a narrow stretch of land. These partners carry pollen, disperse seeds, or protect the tree in ways no other species can replace. Over generations, both partners adapt to each other's presence. The shape of a flower may fit perfectly against the mouth parts of a single pollinator. The timing of fruit drop may align with the daily habits of a rare animal. If either partner disappears, the tree struggles to reproduce or defend itself. These relationships reveal how tightly woven life can become when species evolve together in the same small habitat. Preserving such trees means preserving the unique companions they rely on, and with them, the irreplaceable ecological webs that hold entire landscapes together. Some trees form living communities that behave like single organisms. In certain groves, many trunks rise from the same connected root system, sharing nutrients, water, and chemical messages that coordinate their growth. What appears to be a cluster of individual trees is in fact a single living network spread across wide areas of forest. When one trunk senses stress from drought or infection, the others shift their nutrient flow to support it. Leaves in one section may change color earlier or later than others, based on signals traveling through the shared root web. If one trunk falls, the network continues, sending up new shoots that replace the lost structure. Over time, these groves shape the land as unified beings rather than isolated individuals. Their shared strength allows them to outlast storms, grazing animals, and changing climate. The forest becomes a vast living body made of many stems, but one continuous life. A few tree species can recognize their own relatives. Experiments show that some trees adjust their behavior based on whether nearby individuals share close genetic ties. When growing beside unrelated neighbors, they compete more strongly, expanding roots aggressively and investing heavily in chemical defenses. When growing beside kin, their growth patterns soften. Roots avoid crossing into the same territory. Leaves angle themselves to minimize shading, and nutrient flow becomes more cooperative. This recognition likely arises from chemical cues in the soil or signals exchanged through shared fungal networks. The result is a form of quiet family awareness that shapes how the forest grows. In stands where many related individuals cluster together, competition becomes less intense and group survival improves. These familial patterns ripple across generations, influencing where seeds take root and how groves expand. Some trees share nutrients with weaker trees nearby through intricate underground networks formed by fungi and roots. Certain trees transfer water, sugars, and minerals to neighbors struggling under shade or stress. Healthy individuals with abundant resources send support toward saplings or damaged companions. The exchange flows like a silent generosity beneath the soil. This sharing helps maintain diversity and stability within the forest, ensuring that smaller or younger trees survive long enough to contribute to the canopy. When disturbances occur, such as storms or disease outbreaks, the network responds collectively. Nutrient flow intensifies toward areas of need, allowing recovery to unfold more quickly than any single tree could manage alone. These cooperative exchanges form the unseen foundation of resilient forests, where survival is not only an individual achievement, but a shared endeavor. Certain trees can restrict nutrient flow to competitors. In crowded forests, where every trunk stretches toward the same sky, some trees learn not only to share, but also to hold back. Under the soil, long root systems and fungal threads carry nutrients, water, and chemical messages between neighbors. This network is not always generous. When a tree senses another pushing too aggressively into its territory, it can alter the biochemical signals that move through the shared pathways. Defensive compounds accumulate near the junctions where roots meet, slowing the transfer of water or minerals toward the rival. In some cases, the tree even changes the acidity of the surrounding soil so that its competitor struggles to absorb what little remains. These restrictions do not kill the resisting tree's neighbor. Instead, they limit the growth of the pushier individual, preserving light and space for the larger community. Over years of subtle negotiation, the forest becomes a tapestry of shifting alliances and quiet rivalries, shaped by invisible choices made beneath the ground. Some trees adjust their growth speed to match the rhythm of neighboring trees. Across a dense woodland, trunks and branches seem to rise independently, yet many grow in surprising synchrony. Trees sense changes in light, wind, and root pressure created by those growing nearby. When one individual begins to stretch upward rapidly, its neighbors often slow down or increase their own growth to maintain a balanced canopy. If the forest becomes too uneven, strong winds can topple the most exposed trees. By tuning their pace to the community around them, these species create a shared architecture that stabilizes the whole grove. Young saplings adjust their early growth spurts depending on whether the elders above are expanding or resting. Mature trees sense long-term trends through chemical signals drifting through fungal networks, guiding them toward harmony rather than competition. The result is a living forest that breathes through collective timing, each trunk responding to the tempo set by its companions. A few trees alter their branch angles based on the presence of sunlight competitors. When a nearby plant begins to cast shadows, some trees adjust the orientation of their branches in slow arcs that shift over months and seasons. Sensors in the leaves detect subtle changes in the direction of light, triggering uneven growth within the supporting twigs. Branches closest to the competing plant angle away, while those facing open sky lengthen more rapidly. This does more than preserve sunlight. It reduces the stress placed on trunks and roots by distributing weight in ways that reflect the changing shape of the forest. Over time, the canopy becomes a mosaic of interlocking forms, each tree carving out its own zone of illumination. With movements so gradual, they become invisible to the casual observer. Birds and climbing animals rely on these shifting structures as footholds, using the angled limbs as bridges through the forest's upper levels. Every curve and tilt becomes part of the silent negotiation for light that unfolds within densely layered habitats. Some trees rewrite their internal architecture after losing major branches. When storms, lightning, or heavy snow rip away a limb, the sudden loss creates shock waves through the trunk. The tree responds by reorganizing its flow of water and nutrients, redirecting resources towards surviving branches and reinforcing the tissues around the wound. Vascular channels that once fed the missing limb begin to close,
while new pathways grow in different directions. Inner wood layers thicken in patterns that counter the imbalance created by the missing weight. Slowly, the entire form reshapes itself, often sending out new shoots that restore the symmetry of the canopy. These responses are not impulsive. They follow deep evolutionary strategies that allow the tree to maintain structural integrity for decades after a major injury. The repaired architecture often becomes stronger than the original, turning trauma into an opportunity for reinvention that supports future growth. Certain trees can create spiral grain patterns that strengthen their trunks. Within some species, wood fibers do not run straight from root to crown. Instead, they wrap gently around the trunk, forming a spiral pattern that adds flexibility and resilience. This twisting architecture distributes stress evenly when strong winds push against the canopy, preventing cracks from spreading through the trunk. Young trees often begin with minimal spiral, deepening the twist as they age. And as the environment demands greater durability, the orientation of the spiral can even shift over the life of the tree, adjusting to long-term weather patterns and prevailing winds. When these trunks finally fall and reveal their inner structure, the graceful whorls tell a story of the forces the tree has endured. Carpenters value such wood for its strength and resistance to splitting. Yet, in the forest, the spiral's true purpose is survival, allowing trees to stand firm in landscapes shaped by constant pressure. Some trees produce natural pigments that protect them from intense sunlight. In regions where the sun burns bright through much of the year, certain trees generate colorful compounds within their leaves and bark that shield delicate tissues from ultraviolet radiation. These pigments absorb or redirect harmful wavelengths before they can damage the cells responsible for photosynthesis. The colors may appear faint or vivid depending on the season, rising in concentration when sunlight becomes strongest. As the pigments build, they create a living sunscreen that prevents overheating and reduces moisture loss. Animals respond to these colors as well. Some see them as signs of toughness or maturity, choosing to feed elsewhere. Others use the tinted leaves as navigational cues through the forest. The pigments do more than protect the tree. They become parts of visual language that shapes interactions between plant and wildlife, revealing how deeply sunlight influences the life of a forest. A few trees use chemical shields to protect their leaves from ultraviolet light. Across their leaf surfaces, specialized cells manufacture compounds that fortify the tissue against harsh radiation. These chemicals form transparent layers that do not interfere with photosynthesis, yet block wavelengths that could harm delicate structures within the leaf. During seasons of intense sunlight, the tree increases production of these protective compounds, coating its canopy with a film that absorbs energy and prevents cellular damage. When clouds return or days shorten, the shield thins, reducing the metabolic cost of maintaining it. This dynamic response allows the tree to thrive under conditions that would scorch unprotected foliage.
The chemical shield also affects the behavior of insects, some of which can detect the presence of these compounds and avoid the leaves altogether. In this way, a simple protective strategy becomes a multifaceted defense against the many challenges posed by bright and relentless light. Some trees turn bright colors to signal seasonal transitions. As temperatures shift and daylight wanes, pigments inside the leaves undergo a transformation that reveals vivid reds, oranges, and yellows, normally hidden beneath summer greens. These colors are not merely decorative. They serve as signals to insects that feed on leaves,
indicating that the tree is preparing to withdraw nutrients and become less appealing as a food source. The bright display also helps the tree manage sunlight. As the angle of the sun changes with the season, certain pigments filter the cooler light of autumn, allowing the tree to recover valuable resources before the leaves fall.
The transformation becomes an annual announcement to the forest community, marking the quiet shift into colder days. Animals respond by altering their movements, gathering food, or seeking shelter as the canopy changes hue. The brilliance that humans admire is a strategic display honed by countless cycles of adaptation. Certain trees time their leaf fall to reduce competition. In crowded forests, the moment when leaves release from the branches can determine which seedlings thrive in the next growing season. Some trees drop their leaves early, clearing the canopy so more sunlight reaches the forest floor. This encourages their own seedlings to sprout before competing species can take advantage. Others hold their leaves longer, allowing the fallen litter to form a thick layer that inhibits germination of rival plants. By controlling the timing of leaf fall, these trees influence soil temperature, light availability, and moisture retention in ways that shape the entire understory. The rhythm of shedding is tuned to local climate patterns and the behavior of neighboring species. Through these carefully timed decisions, the forest becomes a living schedule of opportunities and challenges that unfold with the seasons. Some trees renew their crowns repeatedly throughout their lives. Instead of maintaining a single canopy for their entire lifespan, certain trees shed large branches over time and grow new ones in their place. This continuous renewal allows the tree to adapt to changing light conditions, shifts in wind exposure, and damage from storms or animals. Each new crown forms stronger attachments and improved angles, based on the stresses the tree has experienced. The process refreshes the tree's ability to capture sunlight, while reducing the likelihood of structural failure. Older branches that no longer serve the tree drop away, creating openings for fresh growth. Entire forests exhibit this cycle of renewal, with crowns rising and falling like waves over generations. The result is a dynamic canopy that evolves with the environment, allowing trees to remain vigorous far longer than their static appearance suggests. A few trees grow crowns that shift shape in response to wind direction. In regions where storms and steady winds shape the landscape, certain trees develop crowns that slowly rotate or lean depending on the direction of the prevailing gusts. Sensors within the leaves and branches detect pressure changes long before human senses register anything unusual. Over weeks and months, the tree adds growth to sheltered sides while limiting expansion on the windward edges. This results in crowns that subtly migrate, adapting their form to reduce drag and channel force down the trunk in safer ways. The shifting crown does more than protect the tree. Birds nesting among the branches benefit from calmer pockets of air, while small mammals find stable footing even when storms roll across the canopy. Over time, these trees become living compasses that reveal the rhythm of the wind. Their shape records years of invisible negotiation between wood and atmosphere, carving a long history of storms into the graceful geometry above. Some trees create towering canopies that generate their own weather patterns. In humid regions where sunlight and moisture abound, certain trees grow to extraordinary heights, forming upper layers that experience entirely different conditions than the ground below. Leaves in these elevated zones release so much moisture that clouds often begin as faint wisps directly above the canopy. Air cools as it rises through densely packed foliage, creating small currents that lift water vapor toward the sky. These currents can influence when rain forms, where fog gathers, and how often storms pass over the region. Within the canopy, temperatures remain steadier than the open air. Animals that live entirely in the upper branches depend on this stability, timing their foraging and nesting cycles to the microclimate shaped by the trees themselves. The towering crowns act as engines of moisture and moderation, guiding the weather in ways that ripple across entire forests. Certain trees lower the air temperature beneath them. Leaves arranged in layered patterns create pockets of cool shade, even on the hottest afternoons. As sunlight strikes the canopy, water evaporates from millions of leaf surfaces, drawing heat out of the surrounding air. This natural cooling effect can drop temperatures enough to influence which plants grow beneath the branches. Soil stays moist longer, and streams running through these shaded zones remain clear and cool.
Animals seek refuge here during the warmest parts of the day, depending on the tree's quiet regulation of heat. The microclimate extends outward as breezes pass through the canopy, carrying cooler air toward nearby tearings. Over years, this cooling shapes where seedlings sprout and which species thrive in the understory. The tree becomes a living oasis, altering its environment not through effort, but through the elegant mechanics of leaves and light. Some trees produce scents that calm the nervous systems of animals. Within the bark, leaves and resins of certain species lie aromatic compounds that drift through the air in gentle waves. When released in warm sunlight or carried on cool evening breezes, these fragrances interact with the nervous systems of animals that pass beneath the branches. Birds settle more easily in the canopy, mammals become less tense as they forage, and even insects respond with slower, more measured movements.
The compounds evolved primarily as defenses against pests or as signals for pollinators. Yet, they hold a side effect that influences the emotional landscape of the forest. Humans walking through these groves often describe a sense of calm that feels deeper than simple appreciation of beauty. The air itself seems to steady the breath. These trees have become quiet, caretakers of mood and balance, shaping the psychological tone of the places where they grow. A few trees generate natural sound dampening in forest environments. Branch arrangements, leaf structures, and bark textures combine to scatter sound waves that move through the forest. Instead of echoing sharply, noise is softened as it passes around trunks and through dense foliage. In some droves, this effect becomes strong enough to create pockets of quiet where distant sounds fade into a gentle hum. Birds use these zones for nesting, choosing calm spaces where they can hear predators more clearly. Mammals navigate with greater confidence because subtle noises remain distinct instead of getting lost in reverberation. Even heavy rain behaves differently, landing on layered leaves that muffle each drop into a soft patter. These trees create sanctuaries without intention, simply through the structure of their living bodies. They influence how the forest hears itself, shaping communication among creatures that depend on sound for survival. Some trees absorb vibrations through their trunks in unexpectedly complex ways. When footsteps, wind, or distant thunder send tremors through the forest floor, certain trees respond with intricate internal adjustments. Fibers within the trunk shift to distribute the vibrations evenly, preventing damage to delicate tissues. Roots anchor more firmly in areas where the shaking is strongest, while the canopy subtly alters its sway to counterbalance the movement. This sensitivity allows the tree to detect approaching animals long before they are visible. It also helps the tree understand the stability of the soil beneath it, adjusting growth patterns to strengthen weak zones. Over many seasons, These vibration responses become a form of environmental literacy. The tree reads the landscape through movement, learning where the earth is firm, where storms approach, and where new risks might emerge. The entire trunk becomes an instrument to tune to the rhythm of the world around it. Certain trees create acoustic channels inside forests. The arrangement of trunks and leaves in particular species bend sound in ways that guide it along predictable paths. Whispers of wind, calls of birds, and movement of animals travel farther in these channels than they would through a chaotic canopy.
Birds perching in these trees use the channels to send messages across wide distances, relying on the steady flow of sound to coordinate flight or warn of danger. Even predators listen for these pathways as they track prey. Humans walking through such forests often notice unusual clarity in certain directions, as if the trees have carved invisible corridors for sound to travel. These channels fall naturally from the spacing of branches and the shape of the canopy, yet they influence communication patterns for countless species, shaping the auditory map of the entire region. Some trees respond to music with subtle changes in growth. Vibrations from rhythmic sound waves travel through air and soil, reaching the tree's leaves, bark, and roots. Cells responsible for growth react to these vibrations by altering the rate at which they divide or expand.
Soft, steady frequencies encourage gentle upward growth, while irregular noises may slow expansion or redistribute energy towards roots.
The effect is not emotional, but mechanical. The tree senses movement in its environment and interprets it as information about wind, animals, or weather. Music simply provides consistent vibrations that mimic natural patterns, prompting measurable but delicate shifts in the plant's behavior. Over many seasons, these responses can create slight differences in leaf size, branch spacing, and root extension. The tree becomes a quiet listener, responding with the only language it knows: patient growth. A few trees store chemical memories of past seasons. As the seasons cycle through warmth, cold, drought, and rain, certain trees store biochemical traces of each experience within their tissues. These changes influence how the tree reacts to the next shift in weather.
If a previous year brought harsh dryness, the tree strengthens water-retaining cells before the next warm season arrives.
If winter came with deep cold, the tree thickens protective layers sooner when autumn returns. These adjustments create a living archive of experience that guards responses for many years. The memories do not resemble thought, yet they serve the same purpose: learning. The tree becomes better prepared for the world it expects, shaped by the world it endured. Some trees shape the biodiversity of an entire region through their presence. By casting shade, enriching soil, sheltering animals, and controlling moisture, certain trees determine which species can survive within their reach. Their fallen leaves feed the ground, their branches protect young plants from harsh sunlight, and their roots channel water into the deeper earth. Birds choose nesting sites based on the stability of their limbs. Insects specialize in their bark or flowers.
Mammals rely on the fruits they drop or the hollows they form.
When these trees flourish, entire communities flourish around them. When they vanish, the structure of the forest shifts, sometimes collapsing into simpler forms with fewer species. These trees act as keystone forces that hold complex ecosystems together. Their presence is not simply one element among many. It is the foundation upon which the diversity of life in the region is built.
As our quiet journey among the trees comes to an end, let your breath settle into an easy rhythm. You have moved through root and canopy, through shadows and sunlight, through the hidden intelligence that shapes forests in ways we feel long before we understand. There is something deeply comforting in knowing that the world grows with such patience. Trees do not rush. They do not cling. They simply rise, season after season, carrying the memory of the earth in every ring and every whisper of their leaves. If you enjoyed this gentle wander through the natural world, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here as they drift toward rest, one sleepy soul at a time. For now, let the forest fade into a soft blur. Let the quiet settle around you. Let your thoughts drift like leaves floating toward a still pond. Good night.